We're joined by April Kempler and Joseph Kempler. Thank you very much for making the time and coming with us today.
Thank you. We're thrilled.
Let's start off with explain how your relationship with Joe and kind of how you guys made the decision to start this project.
Sure. Joseph Kempler is my father-in-law, and it wasn't until in 2007 when I approached him to begin writing his memoir.
Were you very receptive to that, Joe? Were you excited about it, or were you reluctant to do it?
I was both, really. I was excited and reluctant to review my past. It was difficult.
And what do you think tipped the scales for you? What made you say, you know what, let's do this?
Well, I guess April persuaded me.
He had no choice.
Was it tough or?
Yeah.
Explain what it.
Yes, it was hard. Well, first it was hard because I was nervous that I had never done a project on this size before, or this, even a novel or anything. But I thought we need to really get his recorded memoir down, so then I could put it together in a book format, even if it goes nowhere. If it was just for the family, it was important to know his history, and that's where I took it. And so he graciously allowed me into his life, into his house. I banged on the door a lot. Wake up, Joe. We're doing this. So we went from there, and I just started recording him, letting him talk, and I listened. And
so what was a typical session like that? Were you just talking and writing things down? Were you recording them kind of like we're doing right here?
Yes, I had a little recorder, and I'd say, tell me, about your childhood and where you lived and who your parents were and what'd you do and what'd you do for fun and did you like school and what subjects did you, we just started from that.
Sure. Okay. Joseph, tell us kind of your early years and where you were born.
Okay. I was born in Poland to a Jewish family. Well, the problem started immediately with World War II began on September of 39.
How old were you?
I was 39. I was
11.
Yeah. I was an avid reader. I read everything. I was always tied into a book. So I knew about Hitler and persecution, what's going on in the world from an early age.
But these weren't books that his mother would have wanted him to read. She didn't want him to know that kind of thing. So he was very independent with his choice of reading material.
It seemed like there was a lot of times where you would just kind of sneak off to the library and spend your days reading.
Well, I didn't sneak off, but I sneaked the books in my house. I always had access to books. Now, my mother and father did not really inspect what I was reading. It just was a question of they let me read whatever I wanted to. They were just concerned about my reactions and my behavior in general.
Okay, so were they afraid of you knowing about what was going on and trying to protect you, or afraid of the influence certain things would have on you?
Well, they were trying to protect me because it wasn't really a popular reading, something for kids my age to read. They let me read, but they're very concerned about any influence you may have on me.
Gotcha. So you were saying in here that even though you were reading some of this stuff, it seemed like, I don't know if it was you personally, but it seemed like the people around you still felt like it was a far-off thing, that it wasn't really something you had to be too concerned about.
That's right, because it was remote. Germany was far away. It didn't seem to affect our lives locally. But at the same time, the war began, and immediately there was a fear for the Jews, because we knew that Hitler hated Jews, and many people at that time just left Poland and ran east towards Russia to escape. It was a stressful time.
You were talking about a song that was popular in Poland at the time, that it was kind of starting, and it was saying, the point was that the Polish government was wasting time on unimportant matters. It seemed to me when citizens made fun of the government, there was some truth in what they were saying.
Do you remember the song that they were singing?
Yeah.
The English translation is, Hitler is building planes, and I'm having trouble with it. The
Yeah?
Smigley-Ritz?
Yeah, he was the president.
Well, he is painting fences.
Yeah.
And Hitler is building tanks, and he is going to his lover.
Right.
I guess the next part is when you actually started hearing bombs going off. Was that a point where things got a little bit more serious?
Well, at first, we didn't know who was bombing because just before the war started, there was supposed to be exercises, the Polish Air Forces.
Maneuvers.
So when the bombing started, we had no radio or anything like this. We didn't know whether they were Germans or Polish maneuvers. So but we found out pretty quickly. I went to my friend's house, and his parents asked me, "Do you know there is a war on?" I had no idea. But that's how it started. The information came trickling in from various sources.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot of the information being passed around was just by word of mouth, talking with friends and family members without... Right. Was there any print, like newspapers, that was offering any sort of decent information?
No.
So no radio, no newspapers, just having to rely on...
There was radio.
Mm-hmm.
But the radio was all propaganda, Polish propaganda.
Gotcha.
So there was no access to the truth, but we had to explore any way we could. There was a great deal of panic because we knew that Germans attacked Poland,
mm-hmm.
and they were moving quickly east towards from Germany to Krakow, where we lived. So there was a fear of Germans because we knew what they did in Germany to the Jews. So many people took off east towards Russia, and we stayed. We didn't have any place to go, so we just stayed. And my father, who spent time in Germany, he didn't believe that they're going to be as bad as all that. He had some confidence that they are human, They're not as bad as they were portrayed.
There's parts in there where it seemed like families were shuffling around as people were leaving, either leaving the whole area, and travel between certain areas changed. It was more restricted.
Traveled in what way?
Well, just going,
At what time?
Getting to the point where you were starting to conceal the fact that you were Jewish.
Oh, well, at that time, the Germans were already marched in. I mean, the war started on September 1st,
mm-hmm.
and the Germans entered the town, Krakow, on September 6th. So it was very quick, and immediately they began to persecute Jews. I mean, we knew what was happening in Germany,
mm-hmm.
but to see it firsthand, the persecution, they were catching Jews in town. The religious Jews were beard.
Sure.
So when they found Jews in the street, they used to take their bayonets and cut their beards off, and cutting the people at the same time who were, My father didn't have a beard, and he was in Germany, so he wasn't so afraid of them as the religious Jews in town. So in the beginning there was a fear of Germans, but as long as that person didn't look Jewish or didn't stand out in this way, we felt fairly comfortable.
Okay.
I think his early survival skills were kicking in because as long as he didn't look like other Jews, I think he felt he had some veil or some way of moving about without getting to be a target.
As a matter of fact, in the beginning, for instance, immediately the Jews were not allowed to leave town, and trains were not allowed for the Jews. The streetcars had a section which is called for Jews and non-Jews, and I used to always pretend I was non-Jewish, and I got away with it. So I felt quite safe compared with the religious Jews who are visibly Jewish.
There was a couple of close calls a couple of times that were pretty miraculous. And was there one at a train station where guards started to ask you questions and really investigate what you were saying, and they were distracted? Can you tell us about that?
This was when your family were in the village, and you...
Oh, no, before that.
It was before?
Yeah.
He ran around a lot on his own, strangely enough. And so there were Polish police, probably. Is this the one?
I think so.
Yeah.
And they were people were smuggling, I think, black market items.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I think even though he didn't probably have anything, they were just cracking down more and tightening
Was
who
it
was
the?
going.
I think you went to visit some family members and you brought back a blanket.
Yeah.
That I think your aunt may have
Yeah,
on one of those trips.
It was his sister.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were separated. They had to leave their apartment in Krakow in the Kazimierz, and they left for a village. And the family was separated at this point. His sister was older, about 17 years older, and married.
Uh-huh.
And she and her husband and their family and his family went to a different ghetto, the Tarnow ghetto. And Joe and his family were in a village. They weren't allowed to live in a ghetto because they didn't have a useful skill for the war.
So at that time we had to leave. That didn't matter to the Germans where we went as long as we didn't live in town, the ghetto. We were not allowed in the ghetto. I said we lived in a village among Polish people, and I felt pretty safe. And I would travel to, for instance, to visit my sister in another ghetto.
That was interesting to me when he told me this, because I always thought they were on lockdown wherever they were.
You know.
Yeah, and to a point, I think they were, but he was sneaky.
Yeah, he was able to.
And so he could get messages to and from to the various. He had family in the Krakow ghetto too. That was made famous by the movie Schindler's List.
Yes.
And so he would go from one ghetto to the other ghetto, his being the messenger for his mother.
What surprised me, I guess, is when you pointed out that it was the dangerous part wasn't really necessarily walking around town, but trying to sneak into one of these places.
That's right. I mean, I didn't look Jewish, so when I was in town, I felt safe enough that nobody would accuse me of anything, not being Jewish or something. However, I would sneak into the ghetto. There I wasn't safe because I didn't have permission to live there. Everybody who lived in ghetto had an ID, which made them identify them as belonging in the ghetto. And if I didn't have this paper, there were raids all the time by the Jewish police who collaborated with the Germans. This was quite dangerous, and I was almost caught several times. But I knew how to run, and
he almost was discovered by some police officers who he was out late after curfew trying to get back, and they saw him. They thought, well, let's investigate. We'll pull his pants down and we'll see his. And that was very close call.
Yeah, and what happened? What prevented them from doing that? Yeah. And did that situation make you more aware of how dangerous the situation was and what you were doing?
It was dangerous all along, but I was counting on my appearance.
He needed a better disguise.
Yeah.
So who gave you the medal?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was carrying a medal of a holy medal to identify myself as a Christian Catholic.
He was just so ingenious or sneaky.
Well, this was a way of surviving.
He got better and better at it with each occurrence.
Focus on when you and your family were deciding to leave.
The village?
Yes. What made you ultimately go, okay, we need to make some moves here?
Well, we were not allowed to stay in Krakow. We were not permitted to go to the ghetto because my family didn't have any skills useful for that purpose. We moved to a little village, the whole family, except my brother was in the Polish military.
Junka went to Tarnow, but then was called to a labor camp, and he had to leave you.
Yeah.
He was a tailor there in the village.
Yes. We were told to report to the nearest town, and we knew at that time that towns, reporting to town, it was dangerous. There were people who were shipped off to other camps, labor camps, concentration camps, and stuff like this. We knew about these things, because by that time, the rumors were flying, and we knew that it was dangerous, so we escaped into the forest. The idea was to get away from reporting to the town. So we just ran off and didn't know what to do, but this was an emergency. So we ran across the river at night.
How many of your family members were with you? Because there was a number of them.
Let's see. I remember there were so many dry leaves on the ground. They made terrible noise. Every step was heard. So first of all, stopped for the night, right where we were, and let me think. We just stopped there, waiting for light. This was at night. Next morning, Polish kids, going over the hill to a church which was on the other side of the hill. So we sat quietly, but they came back, and the kids were the boys were chasing the girls through the forest and so on. This was very dangerous. We took off further into the woods to find a safe place, and I was in charge to find a place where there was water nearby, where it can be hidden and not seen. I didn't like the responsibility. It was because if we were caught, we knew we were going to be killed. So it was a scary time.
Yeah, it seemed like to me that you kind of almost lost your faith in your parents' ability to protect you, or
well, they couldn't protect me. I was really trying to protect them. It didn't work very well. It was scary, and then I wanted to leave because I felt the responsibility for them. So I felt if we are caught, it will be my fault. So it was very difficult.
Yeah, there was a point in here where you guys were spotted in there, and the person that found you said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to report you. Just stay right here. You must be hungry. I'll go bring you something to eat."
This was a forester, a very nice guy, apparently. I decided that we could not trust Polish people. He said he is going to help us, but I decided we should leave. We went to another place to hide.
When you did finally decide to leave your parents and go back, they
took me back to make sure that I can get away safely. So they stayed there until they saw me going down the road. Pretty safe.
Once he was away from them, he felt more relieved.
You could focus on surviving and not having to worry about other people.
For them.
Sure. Once you did get back into the village, you were mentioning parts of how you would get around, where you would just hop on a lot of the military trucks that were traveling around, where they didn't really ask any questions. It was just a fairly easy thing to do.
The German trucks, they would occasionally stop and pick people up. They didn't ask any questions. They were going in that direction. We hopped on, dropped us off, and continued where they went. It was a fairly common way for Polish people to get around. So I did this quite often. So traveling with the German trucks, because nobody would stop them. That's how we got around to. We were staying on the main road.
Janek, that was the name of the son.
We were waiting for the truck. It was getting pretty late. I decided if we're not going to get a truck tonight, and I have to spend the night. And there were potato fields nearby. There were very dense, fairly tall leaves.
Sure.
So I said I was going to spend the night there. And then a truck finally stopped at the last minute. We went to Krakow.
But who had seen you? Just as the timing, you were just getting...
Yeah, he saw me.
Yeah, is this Roman you're talking about?
Yeah, these were the the villagers he lived with, but they had turned against them. And so there was a price on their head with the sugar, which was very valuable. And he had seen him. He had been taking his cow. Janek, the boy, was taking the cow, I guess, somewhere. And he ran and got his father, who was going to come report him as a Jew.
I was trying to get back to Krakow to be with my brother, who at that time was already in a camp. So I was trying to sneak back to Krakow. And the boy came with the cow. This was they were taking the cows to have them inseminated by a local bull. So when he saw me, he just turned around, and a few minutes later, well, maybe not a few minutes, 50 minutes or so, his father came down, and he was dressed in a white shirt or something, not his Sunday best, so I figured he was going to the police, obviously. And just then, a truck stopped.
And picked you up.
Yeah, so I went to him like this, because I knew what he was doing.
Sure.
Always taunting.
What made you make the decision to, for lack of a better term, to turn yourself in when you finally just said, enough of this hiding, running around?
Well, what I was going to do is to find a way to join my brother in a camp. This was, at that time, wasn't a concentration camp yet. It was a labor camp. There's a difference. Because it was run by civilians rather than Germans as such. So I was in a ghetto then, hiding. I checked, there was a place where the trucks left for various work assignments out of the ghetto. So I checked which one was going to the airport. When I was ready, after a few days of checking into how it works.
Yeah, you were scoping things out.
I went with one of the trucks to the airport, where I joined my brother.
What made you do that decision, though? Was it just
What?
Jump into the labor camp? Did you not feel safe?
Well, no, I had no place to go. I mean, I didn't feel safe in Krakow. I was in a ghetto illegally, so if I was caught, I would be, I don't know, but killed or sent to another extermination camp. So I made my way to the airport, and there I joined my brother. He wasn't very happy to see me, but he didn't want the responsibility. But I was accepted by the civilians of the camp.
It seems like you just kind of went to work and pretended like that's where you were supposed to be, and
that's it. So they asked me who I was, and they accepted me. I can go to the camp and join your brother.
What kind of work was he doing? Was he still a tailor at that point, or was?
Yeah, he was a master tailor. He worked for. Well, let's see. The Germans found out that there was a tailor in camp who did terrific work, because he was truly a master tailor. And they began to bring him work for themselves and their wives. So he had a pretty safe position.
Yeah, it seems like he was liked by people around him because he did such great work.
Yeah, that's right.
What were you doing at that camp? Were you painting?
You see, there was a hospital there for the Germans, and the beams in the hospitals were eaten by, I guess, worms of some type.
Termites.
Yeah, and so it was being rebuilt with new beams, so the ends of the beams had to be painted with particular...
Some sort of treatment to keep the bugs out.
Right, that's it. So I was working on that. So this was pretty safe. And the Germans were, at that time, pretty friendly, the people who were in charge of civilians. And they occasionally let us go, give us passes to go back to the ghetto for the weekend. And then we would come back with the workers who worked in a camp. But they were not, so I was allowed to go to the ghetto and stay there, and I had a pass which I could be safe. I mean, nobody would keep me in the ghetto because I had a pass to go there for the weekend. So I wasn't bothered by the Jewish police. So I went to the ghetto, and I came back with the workers who were commuting.
Yeah, it seems like there was different shifts going back and forth.
That's right.
So that's what you used to go back to the ghetto with a pass?
Yeah, and then returned with the workers who were assigned to work in the airport.
And one of those stories is when it started to get cold.
We were permitted by the civilian supervisors, gave us passes to go back to the villages where we came from and to get winter clothing.
And what happened when you got back to try and get your warm clothes?
Well, first of all, as we went back, the Polish people who used to live with them refused to give us anything. And then they called the police. And the police came, and the first thing they did is to arrest us and took us to jail. Because the idea was that if we were lying about having passes or anything like this...
Thought you had false documents.
Yeah. So they were going to shoot us, and they had the authority to do that. But they checked with the town where we were going, and finally the authorities there checked back with the
labor camp?
The labor camp. And they were told, yes, we were there genuinely and we need the clothing for the winter. So,
but they were certainly surprised to see you guys when you showed back up.
yeah, the police that arrested us, and we were sitting there in jail, I've checked with the authorities in town. They were given orders to accompany us back and force the Polish people to give us what we need for the winter. So that's what we did, and I got warm clothing, but my parents there were in a ghetto in the nearest town, so we also got clothing for them.
Yes. They eventually, that's right, they didn't stay in the woods. They eventually made the same decision and came back.
At that time they were allowed, this was the permission from the government to tell the Jews who were escaping to give them free pass to go to a nearest ghetto and stay there. So they were trying to round up the people voluntarily to report to the ghetto.
Sure.
Yeah.
A shelf was being built, right?
Yeah.
And the Krakow ghetto was being liquidated.
Right.
And so if you're familiar with the Schindler's List, this is where the two stories collide a little bit, because that was his story also. And the events that took place there were what he was dealing with. And there was a surprising amount of freedom, but it was getting tighter and tighter. And things were getting worse for them. Yeah. And so Prashov was being built. So he was sent there.
So we were sent from the airport, the civilian place, to the concentration camp, which was being built outside of Krakow. So they brought us there, and this was the special, whatever they call it, for us. They were hanging two people, and we had to be there and observe it. So I guess it showed us that this was not a place to be ignored. That this was
pretty obvious show of force.
Yeah.
It was different now for them.
So we watched the hanging. It was with false accusations. The people were hanged they didn't do anything wrong. They were just accused of, there was a kid who was accused of singing communist songs.
That's right. Yeah.
And actually, we had the guards in a camp. There were Ukrainians who worked with the Germans, and they used to sing songs which were not truly Russian, but Ukrainians. But, they make the accusation stick that we were singing forbidden songs and stuff.
There was a young boy and then another adult that was hanged when you got there. And one thing that really struck me was in that part of the story where it didn't work when they tried to hang the boy. The rope break, and the little boy went, basically crawling to the guard, begging for his life.
Yeah, begging. And he begged. He put his arms around the legs of the commandant, Guest, and he shot him. So this was his mercy killing.
Would you consider that to be a labor camp as well, or was that what you would call a concentration camp?
This was a labor camp at the time when I came there, but gradually it was turned into a concentration camp. So it was stricter and more difficult in survival, but at this point the Germans had to follow rules from Berlin as to they couldn't just kill people as they did before by the local authorities, but they had to report to Berlin.
They had to have some, accountability for who they shot and why they shot them.
Yeah, and so
it wasn't just something they could sweep under as easily.
They had to.
They still killed.
Documenting, yeah.
Yeah, they killed freely, but now it was
paperwork.
Justified. They had a reason.
Yeah, there was one point where you were talking about they would force people to. I think there was a story about how there were some Americans that were caught, sent to a place, and they were forced to walk through a hole in the fence to be shot on the other side.
This was in a camp in Austria, Mauthausen. This is the camp where we were sent from Poland to Austria. And we were sent to a camp in, this was a extermination camp, Mauthausen. And we were working in a stone quarry. So as we walked through a trail by the barbed wire, and there in the barbed wire there was a hole, and we were told that they captured some American paratroopers, and under the rules they couldn't kill them. They were prisoners of war unless they were trying to escape. So they forced them to climb through the barbed wire, and then they shot them because they were attempting to escape.
Yeah, so they were just using any arbitrary reason.
Well, they made up their own rules.
I think you pointed out in the book that it's sick as it is, they made almost like a game out of it, or an art, and just finding ways to, or excuses. Let's talk about the stone quarry. They didn't exactly outfit you guys with shoes to be walking around this.
So when we came to Mauthausen, we were kept in the barracks, young people. They were really the Germans in charge of the barrack were homosexuals, and they would pick young boys, for their purposes. I was picked from the group we were in all together in the camp, and they were taken to the barrack outside of the group that we were all together, and we were cleaning windows and stuff, and they were observing us, and they after a day or so they kept some of the kids, and then the rest of us we were told to report to work. So that we went to the stone quarry. And we were barefoot because they didn't give us shoes. We were taken down the famous 186 steps, which was called the Stairway of Death. We were walking down, and then once we were at the bottom, we had to pick up heavy stones and put them in. Two people would put them in our back. We had to march up the stairs again. And this was the problem, that to go back up was very difficult. Whoever dropped the stone and arrived on top without the stone, the guards would take the person to the edge of the precipice and push them down to their death down below. So, but those who also been able to carry the bag without dropping it had to march some distance to a place where we were told to drop the stones on a pile, and then we had to run back down the same routine over again. But being down in a quarry, there was a granite quarry, and our feet were cut up in no time at all, bleeding. So when we ran back on the edge of our feet, trying not to put foot flat down, and started over again. And people died. So many on a stairway down in the bottom just collapsed, and that was the end of them.
They weren't given water, food, or anything, just made to run barefoot with these heavy
Yeah, it seemed like this place was designed just to break people.
What they called the extermination camp. This was the idea, if we found out later, those survivors were going to be shipped to a sub-camps of the main camp where we were. And this was the idea to eliminate the weaklings, those who were not able to work. So this was
Wasn't there an expression they said, return not necessary?
Yeah, our files, I found them after the war. Our files were marked in German, return not desired, which was a nice way of putting it. That we should die in a camp, not to come out alive.
You were just mainly focusing minute by minute on survival.
That was the only thing.
It was popular in the camp to say if somebody wanted to say something would never happen.
Tomorrow. Tomorrow doesn't exist. We only live for the present, immediate. It was moment by moment.
And was it at this camp that you really lost your faith in God?
Actually, I began to lose my faith before that. I was still in Poland because, praying didn't do any good. You could pray and nothing happened. So the idea is God was useless. There's no use praying to him. But by the time I got to the Mauthausen, the Austrian camp, faith in God was gone altogether.
So you were at Mauthausen for, did you say, a month?
Yeah.
About? And the whole time working in the stone quarry, carrying stones.
Right.
With bare feet.
He didn't get a cushy job.
The only people who were left in the barracks were the victims of the homosexuals.
Yeah. And so then after he survived that ordeal, which is a miracle how anyone could survive.
Sure.
But he did. Very strong person. He was sent to Melk.
Yeah.
Which Melk is where he saw all different nationalities. So it
Yeah.
becomes even more. Just every camp had its own unique stamp.
You just had sheer willpower to stay alive.
Well, that was the purpose of just to stay alive, to survive. This was the only goal. There's nothing else.
Once you did leave Mauthausen, they did give you shoes on the way out, albeit they were wooden and canvas and didn't fit very well.
Well, everybody had the same size shoes, and there were wooden soles nailed to the side, and they fell apart pretty quickly. Couldn't bend your foot or anything like this. It was just
flat-footed.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Melk. There was a lot of different nationalities, people from all over the place that were in this.
There were people there even from, like for instance, Spanish Republicans in Civil War, and there were Russian prisoners of war. Rather than being kept in prisoners of war, they put them in concentration camps. So all kinds of people. That's what I met Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, is it that camp?
Yeah.
Okay.
You see, we were in a barracks, but in the evening we could walk around the camp as long as we get back by curfew time. But I noticed one barrack which people couldn't get out. So I asked who they were. So the old-timers told me they are Bibelforscher, which was Bible researchers, something like this.
Okay.
So I was told that they were in a camp. Well, I thought that they were Germans. So I said, Germans in a concentration camp, what did they do? So I was told that they wouldn't hire Hitler. They refused to join the German army, and they were kept in a camp for this. So, and what made me think that they were Jews? They were suffering because they worshipped Jehovah. And I knew Jehovah was the name of the Jewish God. But the Jews were not allowed to pronounce it. It was too holy to pronounce. So I was wondering, they must be Jews if they worship Jehovah. But I was told, no, they were Germans.
Aryans,
right.
Aryans.
Yeah.
So it was just this
It was confusing.
complete mystery.
Yeah.
You didn't know a whole lot about them at the time.
No, I never met them.
Why didn't you know what would happen to you if you were seen talking?
Well, there was the famous punishment, 25 strokes with the right patch, which was, I call it,
a whip.
But this was heavy with it's all wires inside. So if somebody, this was by the punishment, they'll put people over the wooden block and strip their pants down. And they beat us. And the person who was beaten had to count out loud. That's 25 strokes. But for any reason, many people were not speaking German. They were not Germans. And German's language is a bit difficult because, for instance, when you say 1 in English, in German this is 1 and 20, and 2 and 20, and so on. So if anybody lost the count or fainted, whatever happened to him, they would revive him and start over again. So many people died, or they taken to the Revier was the hospital. Whoever went to hospital, the chances they would never come out. So the witnesses were treated that way.
And if you were seen talking, even if it was maybe to ask a direction or ask something innocuous, they were considered to be maybe dangerous because of the positive message that they shared with people. They didn't want them to have that positive message. Therefore, they curbed that desire by the 25 strokes.
The 25 strokes.
So therefore, Joe didn't take that risk.
So I never spoke to a witness.
What struck me was that it seemed like you were thinking that these were people that you could actually trust because, everybody around you was just looking out for themselves and trying to keep themselves alive at any cost.
That's right. Witnesses have the reputation of never turning anybody in or doing anything wrong. So these are the only people that reputation was they could trust them. And you could tell a witness not only by the triangle they wore.
Was it the purple triangle?
Right. But when they walk down the street in a camp, and they came towards you, you can look in their face, and they could look at yours without fear. There was something about them that was trustworthy. So we liked the witnesses, even though I never knew what they believed at that time. I just knew that they believed in Jehovah, and that they were in that camp because they didn't join the army or did not follow Hitler. So there was something good about them, but I didn't talk to them.
What else made them stand out to you? They could leave if they wanted.
Well, this was, didn't stand out. This was something I was told, and I couldn't believe that. I was told if they signed a statement renouncing their religion, they would go free. I said, that's impossible. Because, why do you say that? I said, because if they would give them a chance to go free, the barrack would be empty. And I couldn't believe that somebody who was given a chance would stay in the camp. So this was an amazing thing, that people would actually stay voluntarily because of faith in a Jewish God. It doesn't make sense.
Something else in here was, it seemed like you were dealing with food here. When you were given a piece of bread, it was almost like a mental anguish deciding what to do with the bread. You know, do I eat it now? Do I save it for later?
It was a mental anguish. The idea is, see, if you received the slice of bread in the evening, so I wanted to save it to the next day when I'll need it. But so I put it in my, hid it in my shirt, in my chest. But this was such a temptation. I couldn't think about it, so I had to take a piece. And once I took a piece, it says, there's not enough for now, I have to eat it all now. It was a torture, trying to dealing with the bread.
And you couldn't really stash it anywhere, so to speak.
No.
And then there's the elements outside. He was doing work outside. It was raining and cold. What do you do with a piece of bread? It gets soggy or...
That's right.
Yeah, it's just an impossible decision.
And there was...
I don't know if this is in the story, but one time as I received my ration of bread, I was called out to do some work. They called up a number, so I had to go, and I said, I had a friend, please hold it for me until I come back. And then I came back and I asked for my bread, and my friend says, it disappeared.
It's gone?
Yeah, it's gone. And he gave me a piece of fish just to be nice to me. And after the war, when I was in the hospital, this friend came to visit me. He was going to Israel on the illegal immigration, but he came to tell me something on his mind, that he was the one who stole my bread.
So was it the person that you asked to hold it? He did eat the bread?
Yeah.
But I guess...
And the conscience bothered him so much he couldn't leave without telling me. So asked me for forgiveness.
That's what I was wondering when I was reading that. That part is in the story, and when I was reading it, I was wondering if he did eat it or if it actually did get stolen.
He ate it.
But then...
He probably shared his bread with him.
But he did eventually come and find you and tell you that.
He couldn't go to Israel until he had cleared his conscience. And so this was something Joe remarked on too, in that he wouldn't have probably confessed had it been him.
Oh yeah? You think not? You would have just...
Well, probably. I had no conscience at all at that time, so I would have done whatever is easier for survival.
Yeah, that was one theme that comes up a lot is just humanity was gone.
Yeah,
there was no remorse for anybody because you couldn't think about it. You just kind of had to...
You had to block it out. That's the whole idea.
Well, you mentioned after the war, was Milk the last camp you were at?
No. For Milk, we went on a death march to the final camp, which was Ebensee in the mountain. People were dying like flies. And this is the place where the Russian prisoners of war who were... Well, when people died, and they were died by the hundreds at least, and there was a crematorium, but they couldn't burn them fast enough, so they stuck them outside the crematorium, and the Russians would sneak at night and cut away pieces of flesh, and then try to sell them for cigarettes.
They would trade?
You see, the Germans who were in charge of the work in Ebensee, what we did there is American planes used to come at night and bomb the junction station, which was some distance from the camp, and made a whole mess. The bombing trains and the locomotives fell into the bomb pits, and it was impossible work.
But his work on Ebensee was fixing the rails and digging out the trains from the craters.
Oh, I see.
And they had no food. So they were starving and doing this real heavy labor. But yeah, he's made the bargain with God. Like, is that what you were talking about? No. There was like some shred of faith, even though he said he was going to ignore God. I think his life, he felt scared. If God saved him, then he wouldn't complain about doing any of the work.
That's right.
But this was in Milk.
Milk, yes.
Yeah. Ebensee was, this is just a place to die. And people indeed were dying like flies. And so this is where the Russians cut away pieces of dead bodies and sold them for cigarettes. And cigarettes were offered to prisoners by the Germans to work harder. Anything was allowed if they're not caught. But the idea is that this was permitted because there was officially given to prisoners for hard work. So people smoked. And I remember at one point I was gathering some dry leaves and roll them up in another leaf and try to smoke it. So I smoked too, anything at all to, survive or do something before we die. It was just desperate measures.
I hear you. How much did you weigh at this point?
I don't know, but at the end of the war, after it was several months before I wound up in the hospital when I first weighed, and that time I was 60 pounds.
60 pounds?
Yeah.
And how close do you think you came to starvation, dying of it?
You see, we knew the symptoms because starvation is preceded by accumulation of water and a swelling of the face and a puffiness of the eyes. And So once people reached this point, we knew how much longer they could live. It usually was within 24 hours. And I already had this swelling. As a matter of fact, I don't remember. After the war, I was still swollen. I have a picture with my face the swelling was uneven. There was more on one side than the other. So I was walking around like this. It took me a long time to recover. You know better what's missing. Yeah.
When they first found you guys.
They gave us food.
Yeah, their intentions obviously were to help you guys, but what happened when you guys did actually get decent food?
First of all, when they came to the camp was just a patrol of some type came on half trucks, and they entered the camp and people were starving. I mean, there were many dead people lying all around and so on, and they found out it was a lack of food, so they immediately went to the nearest town of Ebensee and found some storehouses of food for the Germans, and they brought it to the camp, cans of pork and beans and stuff, told the kitchen staff that was still there to cook up and give us all we need, all we want. And this was a terrible thing because they killed so many people, not wanting to by being kind. So they brought the food to us, but we, as usual, were still concentration camp trained, so we lined up properly, and the dish was always hanging on a wire on the side. We came to they brought the kettles from the kitchen full of food, and they poured it on. So, but there was more. So I and the others went back to the bunk, and we ate the food, swallowed really, and then wiped the dishes with the elbow to make sure they are clean, because we couldn't go twice in the camp. So there was still food, so we pretended that we were starting over again.
Okay.
And we got food again, full of pork and beans and fat flowing on top. I couldn't eat it anymore. So I went back to the bunk and sat there and watched it to make sure nobody steals it. And before long, there was call for food again, a few hours later. In the meantime, there was a layer of fat on top, and I had a problem. What do I do with it? So I couldn't eat the fat. What did I do with it? I skimmed off the fat, threw it away or something. And I ate the cold soup and wiped this dish with the elbow to make sure that I didn't eat yet. And I went back and I got another bowl full of the food. All I know
people that are starving, that's not a good thing to do.
No, but the idea is, what did I do? Did I watch the food again? Because I certainly didn't throw it out. So I ate it for sure, after skimming the layer of fat off. And that's where the dying started. People were dying, standing up, trying to eat, and I fell down bad. Dead. It was a massacre. So many people died. But we didn't feel sorry for them. As a matter of fact, most of us had such terrible diarrhea that we went looking for dead bodies to see whether anybody has clean pants.
You were saying a lot of people weren't even wearing pants, or
no, because they couldn't. We didn't wear pants. We didn't. So we had to get new ones. So we stripped the dead bodies. But it's hard to. It was tough. Let's put it this way. Dead people all over the place, thanks to Americans
and good intentions. So, how did you end up leaving that final camp?
Well, Joe had a great fear of hospitals, but he was really sick, and the Holocaust came through.
Okay, so is that when the...
Yeah, looking for people who needed to go to the doctor, but he didn't want to do that. The military moved in, basically.
Well, the Americans came in, but before they came in, by that time, at the end of the war, most of the German watchtowers who were surrounding the camp were empty. The Germans took off. I remember the camp commander. We were called to the roll call, the appel, as we called it, and we stood at the appel, and the camp commander, his name was Gantz, I remember, he addressed us as gentlemen. He says, unfortunately, the Americans came in, and we have to turn the camp over to them, but probably they will be fighting before that, so he asked us whether we go to the tunnels for our safety until the camp is taken over. And we all said no, first time ever. Refused to go because we addressed as a gentleman. He politely asked us for our own safety. We didn't want to go. He couldn't force us.
Were you afraid that it was a trap?
Oh, yeah, we were always afraid. I mean, couldn't trust the Germans. At which point we were taken out of the camp. You remember, April?
After the pork and beans thing, they came and they set up camp there, and they were trying to get people their ID cards, set them up. And he stayed there a while, and then the military did take them to a different sort of a displaced persons camp nearby, and to the Americans, they were all, the Poles were Poles, so they put all the Polish people together.
Okay.
And there were some
Jews or not.
Jews or not. So there was a little bit of infighting with a lot of, trauma even after. It just didn't save the day.
What were the conflicts about?
The Poles were always anti-Semitic, so they didn't want to have Jews around. But we were put together, so there was a separation. We were moved out of the camp, the Jews, finally.
Near the mountain. Remember the fire mountain?
Yeah,
whatever it was
fire
called.
Kogel, yeah.
So they were there. Eventually it got worked out that they were separated, but
during that time it was very dangerous.
Hard.
Yeah.
They were always trying to get food, and so now they were free, they were still in a displaced person camp. Even though they had food, it wasn't ever enough food. So they'd go to the outlying villages and, beg the farmers. And Joe was so skinny that they thought he could garner a lot of pity. And if they dragged him along, then they'd get more food for sure. Yeah. But they never really shared it with Joe.
Oh, gotcha.
He was just the decoy. But he did make a friend, and he was ill. He wasn't gaining weight, so he was very thin. And he had a champion who got him to see a doctor who he forced to enter him into a hospital. It was a German hospital.
Okay.
For tuberculosis, or for the pilots. Was it a TB hospital?
Yeah.
So then he recovered.
The Luftwaffe.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Luftwaffe. And he started to recover there.
I was in a hospital, and the German hospital, and I was afraid to tell him I was Jewish. So I was always trying to hide my circumcision, stuff like this, because the doctors were German, and all the people in the hospital, the patients, were all Air Force officers. So it was dangerous. I felt it was dangerous even then. So
it didn't go away for a long time. Even after he came to America, he still saw a uniform. gave him a fright, the
Sure.
first thing.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I remember walking down on 34th Street in Manhattan, and I saw a policeman coming this way. So I was scared. I mean, I tried to get off the path so I'm not in front of him because I was afraid of uniform. Every uniform was a threat, but I didn't overcome it for a long time.
How long after the war? How long after the war did it take for you to decide to come to the United States?
It was 1947 in November. How did this happen? I don't remember.
He was in a displaced persons camp, and they were children that they were going to have homes for them in America. And he was 17 when he was liberated, and so he was reunited with his sister, and together they decided they wanted to go to America. But it was a lot of paperwork and waiting and going through the process. And this seemed like a good opportunity as a young person to be relocated. So his sister and her husband went on their own way to get to America, and he went through the program.
By himself?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think
was rejected a number of times because I had a spot on my lung. I had TB.
Okay.
In the camp. So they kept me, rejected me to see what happens to the
waiting to see what happens.
Whether it's active or not. So I was rejected a number of times. I went to the civilian doctor to take some x-rays on my own. They thought it was arrested. It wasn't active. But the American procedures were tougher.
And as a result, he aged out of the program, and his sister and her husband were already on their way to America, and he was stuck in Germany.
Did you come to the United States under this program, or did you make the trek on your own?
No, it had to be a program. You couldn't come on my own. So I came through the Hebrew immigration, something.
Sure, okay.
Some group that help people to come to America and get settled here.
And so you first came to New York?
Yeah.
But he took, in the displaced person camps, they were essentially another form of a camp.
Sure.
But he took advantage of, they offered schooling. He always knew he wanted to come to America, so he learned English. He was taking a radio class. So even though he was delayed a couple of years, he did a lot of things while he was there.
A lot of preparation.
And he furthered the somewhat education, and he furthered other things. And as a result, he was part of a very interesting court, a pre-trial, not for the Nuremberg trial, but it was in Dachau. They were trying to identify Nazis and those Gestapo and people that could be identified by survivors.
Gotcha.
So he was part of this very interesting pre-trial arrangement. Fascinating story. Even after the war, it didn't just end for him.
Yeah, sure.
So much adventure. I say adventure, but I mean, it was hard.
I remember too, when I was in a displaced person camp, we were not allowed out without passes or stuff like this. President Truman at that time sent, Harrison, he was an envoy sent by Truman to find out what's happening in these camps, because there were rumors and all kinds of stuff. He wrote a report based on our camp. They are still in a camp and not guarded by the Germans, but guarded by the Americans. So we were not free to go anyplace. It wasn't easy under the Americans.
But he gradually made it. Yeah,
they sent me to Bremen in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
This was the port where the ships went to America. So we were there in another camp, and finally the ship arrived and they put us on. And it was a tough trip. We were sick, I remember.
Did you get seasick?
Yeah, I remember the one survivor who was throwing up. He was so sick. He was throwing up overboard and he was cursing Columbus.
You can find the humor in these. When he came, he had to find a job. He spoke, your English wasn't that great, but you were okay. You were learning.
I was studying English in Germany. UNRWA, that's around schools. So, you know what UNRWA is, right?
No, tell me.
United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Association. It was a United Nations group. So they were running the camps and they established schools and provided food and all kinds of things for us. I was there until 1947.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Then you went back to Landsberg.
But they shipped me to the camp in Bremen then.
He calls it a camp, but it was like a way station, and they even had cleaning assignment. I mean, it was still organized, and he had to do a certain amount of cleaning there, and it was a waiting period, and just having to go through this process before he could even just get on a ship.
Okay. So, I'm wondering when you actually felt
free?
Yeah.
Not for a long time. Well, first of all, I was of the age where the draft still wasn't in effect. So a friend and I decided to enlist in the National Guard just before the order was signed by Truman. What was the order? Anyway, we joined the National Guard. Well, I had some radio training in Landsberg, so they put us in communications, and I remember we had maneuvers, and I was on the radio there. And this was a situation where we were in a bivouac, pretending it was enemy, training for the safe from the enemy. And I was on the radio, and I guess somebody reported that there is a spy or something, because I was speaking with an accent. It wasn't an American, so they took my radio transmission as being from the enemy.
Wait a minute, this doesn't sound right.
So part of it was fun, I guess, sort of.
You were experimenting with different foods, too. You had pizza for the first time?
Oh, yeah.
What did you call that?
Some form of chewing gum, I forget.
Italian chewing gum.
Italian chewing gum, there you go.
So he decided he didn't want to limit. He experimented he ate shellfish, he ate pork, he ate Italian chewing gum, he had hot dogs, and he loved American food. He liked any food.
Okay, I'm sure.
And to this day, he was always taking pictures of his food.
Okay.
Food was a really big factor in Joe's life.
Nice. Has there been anything you haven't tried?
One of the strangest things was he used to be a consultant. He worked for a Korean company.
Yeah.
And he would go to Korea. He ate, I remember.
Kimchi,
Well, not that. That's not unusual, but they chopped up a live octopus.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he'd throw the bits in his mouth, and he could feel it sucking all the way down.
Ooh.
And I was just...
No, thanks.
No, thank you. But, so this is it. He will not limit himself from anything.
That's great. That's great.
Even though maybe, questionable.
Wow, that's
good.
Would you have it again?
Yeah.
Tell us more about how your life came together once you kind of settled in the United States.
Well, let's see. I settled in the States. I didn't travel until...
Just when he was in the National Guard, he traveled a lot because of the various
different places.
Camps that they would practice.
Gotcha.
So I was in the camps. The various military camps. And I remember I was in a Camp Drum in New York. And I guess when the Korean War came, they activated us. But they didn't send us to Korea. But I was in Korea. It's all confusing.
You were later for work. He did a lot of his traveling later. He only had a 5th grade education. Mm-hmm. And so I think he became more focused on work and career and education when he came to this country. And he was learning skills in the National Guard, and he started out as a grease monkey. He wasn't really happy with that.
Uh-huh.
High Fidelity was coming in to style, and he was very taken with sound and music. He loved music. And so, strangely enough, 2 deaf men introduced him to his future career of being in sound.
Who, could you tell us who that is?
Yeah, I was working in a factory. I was a grease monkey.
Mm-hmm.
And they had music by Muzak playing through the loudspeakers for everybody. And there were 2 deaf men who always, talked to each other in sign language. And I liked them, but, I didn't talk to them. I couldn't.
Sure.
So I remember I was in the room where we changed our clothes.
Mm-hmm.
The music was something familiar and very nice. So I was, directing, moving my hands.
Okay.
Like an orchestra.
Got it.
Like with a baton.
Okay.
So they looked at me, and one wrote a note that I shouldn't make fun of them.
They thought you were teasing them?
Yeah, because they were gesticulating and I was doing
Sure.
the same thing. So I apologized. I told them I'm not. They just like music, and reacted this way. So a few days later, one of the deaf people gave me some pages cut out from Reader's Digest, which talked about high fidelity. And this is my first exposure to the word, and I didn't know that it existed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how it started, but I went to some of the radio stores in New York where they had high fidelity music and stuff like this. And how did I get the money? I don't know. I bought my high fidelity speaker system. It was disassembled. The speaker was separate and the cabinet was separate.
Sure.
And I had an old Hallicrafted radio that I inherited from my brother-in-law or something. So I brought it to where I was living with friends, and I assembled it at night. And next day, I took some of the wiring out from the Hallicrafters so they have an output independent of the amplifier in a radio, and put it on the speakers. Terrific sound. I didn't expect anything like this. I mean, I did because I heard it in a store. But this was in my own room, really fantastic. And the people I was staying with came in and they congratulated me or something.
Yeah, well, at first they thought he was a lunatic for spending his money on this, and
Okay.
they didn't understand his vision.
Did they see it like are you wasting money on
Yes,
a toy?
you'll be sorry. This is the dumbest thing you've ever
They were
done.
going to get in touch with my sister who was in Denver.
And so then when they heard it, they shook his hand.
Okay.
Okay,
I take that back.
You were ahead of your time.